Sophia here. This is day 7. We finally made it to Versailles. We had a big glitch this morning. We were supposed to be here about 2.5 hours ago. Hey, Edward.
Hi. We only have 3 days here.
Yeah, the RERC line was closed, so we had to get off the train and then walk about 1.5 miles to the next station. Finally got on another train, and the train took 25 minutes. So the 15-minute ride to Versailles turned out to be a 2.5-hour ride. And we're already tired because we had to walk, and I had promised everybody there was going to be limited walking today. But we finally made it to town. The castle is about 10 minutes by walk from here, so we're just going to go check it out, and we'll see the whole castle. Then we'll go to the gardens and see the Trianon and Marie Antoinette's village. Okay, so I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I guess here we are. This is Versailles Palace, all the way in the background. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it a little bit. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people there because we are coming in late, but what can we do, okay? So let me just give you, while we're walking, and you can see the gates, and I probably should stop right here because otherwise it's going to keep moving. So going back to Versailles, the king decided that he needed to have a bigger palace than anybody else in Europe, and he pretty much did. He built Versailles. Now, you may think, well, this guy is a nutcase. Well, let me say this, okay? A lot of the things that we see in Paris today are either thanks to Louis XIV or thanks to Napoleon. And I'm going to give you a few examples here for Louis XIV. He was the one who coined the term the City of Light for Paris. Paris was the first town to have oil lamps throughout all of the streets, or main streets in Paris. So the city itself, in the old days, used to have guys that would come in, they had a clock in their hand, and at a certain time they would snuff the lights, the candle lights or whatever they had in the streets, and the city would become blackout. Around the time of Louis XIV, he wanted everybody to know that Paris was the best city in the world, or at least in the Eastern world and Europe. So what he did is that he commissioned specific lamps to go throughout all the bridges and around town, and they had glass cut in a way that would reflect the light and make a little tiny wick appear to have 20 candles. The second thing it did was that in those days, if you wanted to get a dress made or shoes made or a piece of furniture made, anything that was manufactured, you would go to a shop, but the shop would be pretty much upstairs. You would go inside somebody's house who happened to be a dressmaker. He wanted to have the people of France start to be fashionable like the folks in the court. And in order to do that, you had to make that stuff accessible. So he brought all the shop owners from their upstairs apartment and started windows and window shopping. And in order to do the window shopping, you needed the lights on the street. So the whole idea of walking down the street and seeing a shop with a couple of dresses on display, a couple of pastries on display, and shoes and accessories and all of this stuff comes from Louis XIV. He wanted that. Number 3, the brilliant cut for diamonds comes from Louis XIV. He was a dancer and he was a theater lover. Every night he would perform for the court at the palace itself. But he felt that people couldn't really see him because he wasn't sparkling enough. So he commissioned jewelers in the town of Paris, which is really not that far, it's about 13 miles from here, to start creating costumes for him that would sparkle more. So they had more embroidery, of course, gold embroidery and silver embroidery, but he felt that the diamonds weren't sparkling enough. So at the time, they were cutting diamonds in what they call the rose shape, which is a flat top with a very few cuts along the side and a flat bottom. That's the only way they were doing diamonds back then. He commissioned jewelers to start figuring out a way to get diamonds to sparkle more by candlelight, because that's all they had back then, in oil lamps. Hence the brilliant cut. That's when it was invented. So of course now Louis XIV is in his court and dancing and doing theater and attending performances in the Grand Hall or the Galerie des Glaces at Versailles, and with the light in the evening he's basically sparkling all over the place because this guy is covered in diamond and gold. Get it? Okay. Number 5. because he wanted to be #1 in Europe, he hired a lot of spies to find out what was going on in other countries. In particular, Louis XIV became very jealous of the Venetians because they had a way of cutting glass and doing mirrors that he could not get here in France. So he started by sending people to pay off some Venetians and Italian glass and mirror maker to have them come to France and do it for him, and they would not do it. So when he couldn't buy them, he decided to send spies. The spies were caught by the Venetians and were actually killed. Okay, so the next best thing for Louis XIV was actually to abduct. He literally did that. He abducted a bunch of Venetian glassmaker and told them, look, you're gonna do the work for me. You're going to show my people how you make the glass and how you make the mirrors the way you guys do it. And in exchange, I'm going to take care of your family in Italy. And they did. And this is how the whole of mirror was created. Back then, they were still doing mirrors where they would polish a piece of silver or a piece of metal, and you could only have a certain amount of space of foot, you know, of the footprint itself was small. But the Venetian had figured out a way to pour the glass and back it with silver in order to get a large mirror. So once they got that, he created the whole of mirror. And you will see it in a minute where the entire gallery is a big square mirror attached to one another to create a huge mirror, and there's like hundreds of them. Okay, so that's one of the things that Louis XIV did. So a lot of people would think, well, this guy is a megalomaniac, he's crazy, and I get it, he's a little eccentric, but he did great things for France. Number 6, he built Les Invalides, hospital for the veterans of his wars. He was at war all the time with the usual guys we were at war with for centuries. Prussia, Germany, Austria, all of these folks, we were at war with them. And he had a lot of veterans coming back and wounded, so he created and he built that specific hospital, which is massive, to make sure that his people would be taken care of. All right, so that was 6 things you need to know about Louis XIV. I'm trying to rehab him a little bit because I know that people think he's a little megalomaniac. So, while I was talking, we made it to the gate. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we're going to visit the Chateau de Versailles. I hope you enjoy it.
Amen.
See you in a bit. So we're entering the apartments of Versailles here, and I'm going to do the best I can to do some kind of narrative. So of course most of the apartments themselves are empty. These were antechamber or secondary living room. You're going to see a lot of this style of furniture here in Versailles. These were made by Boulle. They're recognizable by the dark wood and the brass inlay. Just a little bit of history here. At the turn of the Revolution, a lot of the furniture in Versailles was placed on auction. Most of the monarchies outside of France came here, in particular England, Germany, and Austria, and purchased a lot of those furniture for very, very cheap. So if you get a chance to come to Versailles, spend some time looking at all the paintings. They are all contemporary to all of the kings that lived here. They are all famous people, cardinals, countesses, bishops, ministers. They are absolutely stunning. Most people just pass through. So these are all the sisters and brothers of the king. And here's another one of those cabinets by Boulle.
Why do most of them have long hair?
Huh?
Why do they have long hair?
The men wore wigs. That was the fashion of the time. There's a view of the garden. Anywhere you are in Versailles, there will be views. It's absolutely stunning. And that's only just a tiny piece of the garden. We're actually on the side of the main palace. The main palace is over there looking that way. So since we moved to the main floor, this door here is actually that one that opens on the mezzanine in the chapel. So the king would come to this room to attend mass. They would open the gates, or the door rather, and he would come to this balcony right here and attend mass. You see the chapel that we saw earlier. So now look at the ceiling. It is absolutely gorgeous. I believe this room here is the breakfast room. This is where the king would come in and have his breakfast in front of the court. And when breakfast was done, he would just slide into the next room where he would have his religious service. The rooms where the king would be seen or be available to be seen by the court are usually the largest room inside the palace. On the other side, all the little rooms that we passed were waiting room for people who are waiting to meet with the king. Anybody around the time of the king could come and see the king. You would have to wait in line, of course, and be presentable. So they would have a rental of proper attire at the entrance of the castle so that you could come and see the king and ask, make your request, whatever request it was, but be presentable. So you notice that the first rooms that we saw with all the paintings were not decorated. They didn't have real marble on them. It was painted marble. These were not rooms where the king would actually present himself. These were just waiting rooms. So once you pass the chapel and you get into the breakfast room, you actually enter the real apartments or quarters where the king would stay. And all of those rooms will have actual marble on the walls. They would have paintings on the ceiling. All of the wood is gilded. These are indicative that the king would actually sit or stay or be present in all of those rooms.
So wait, only the rooms that the king went to look good?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're entering the king's bedroom. I'm going to try to squeeze myself through the crowd, which is a little difficult here. There was a big ceremony every morning when the king woke up, and if you ever watched Mary Antoinette by Sophie Coppola, you probably got a glimpse of that. The waking of the king was announced. About 200 people would come to this room, would stand in front of a banister and watch the king wake and bid the king good day. He would then move to another room where he would be dressed. And then, of course, there was breakfast. Somebody would come here and read the news, tell him what's going on in the kingdom. There's a gorgeous clock. The king and the queen did not sleep in the same bed. They had different apartments. We're entering the beginning of the Hall of Mirror, which is all the way over here. So that's just the beginning of it. We're gonna get in. That was the main ballroom. Here's Louis XIV again on his horse. Coat of armors. The fleur-de-lis, symbol of France. So here we are entering the Hall of Mirror. And remember the story I told you at the beginning about the mirrors on the left side. Each window on the right is faced by an equal size mirror on the left. And during the day, it basically allows for all of the light to be redirected towards the center of the room. In addition, at night, for all of the chandeliers to be reflected in the mirrors as well. The king would be presented on this end with the court on the other end, and he would descend throughout the entire hall. Now imagine by candlelight what it would look like with the king adorned in gold and diamonds. I can only imagine that it would be very, very impressive. So this is another king's bedroom. This is the absolute center of the castle, and it is facing east so that the sunshine would basically wake the king every morning. They would come in and open those panels right here to let the sun in. This is the room the king would use when he didn't want to be bothered and he didn't want to have the entire court watching him for his awakening. So we finally made it out of the castle. Unfortunately, it's kind of getting late in the day, so we didn't go see the Queen's apartments and the concubines' apartments and all of that stuff. It's just massive. It's just like the Louvre. You need more than one day. You definitely need more than 4 hours, which is what we got. So we are going to the gardens and find one of those little stands so we can eat something, and then we're going to head out to the Trianon and Marie Antoinette's Hamlet. Just a little chit chat about Marie Antoinette. She's been given a bad rep for many years, and I think that it's time that we rehab her a little bit. Marie Antoinette was born in Austria. She was 16 when she was forced to marry Louis XVI. I think she was actually younger. They didn't know each other, they just heard of each other. And Louis XVI was not very interested in anything political or even being a king. That, on top of it, he also had issues with the functioning of what was happening down there. So she got married to him, and for many years, the court became very angry at Marie Antoinette because she could not bear the king a child. So eventually, the King of Austria came to Versailles after many years of trying and not having a grandchild, brought in his own doctor, and they found out that there was an issue with the way the king was born, and turned out he had to get circumcised. That's the story. From that point forward, poof, a kid. So they had 2 of them, and things didn't get any better for her. Her reputation of being a spendthrift was already established. Now, with regards to her having a little hamlet, life was really boring for Marie Antoinette. She was born in monarchy in Austria, where the King of Austria himself was doing things a little bit different. It was countryside over there. They had animals all over. She had a petting zoo as a child, and she was all the time running up and down hills in little shoes and just little dresses, not being very pompous, not doing any of that stuff that the court of France was doing. So when she got thrown into the whole routine and regimen of the court here at Versailles, she had difficulty adapting. So her only response to that, and her salvation really, was to build the little hamlet which resembled the place where she came from, or at least a country home that they had, and she kind of recreated the life over there in the hamlet that she had when she was in Austria as a child. So that's the reason why she had this. Some people who are mean-spirited would say that Marie Antoinette built the hamlet because she wanted to feel what it was like to be poor or to be a commoner. That is not that at all. So now we're going to talk about the let them eat bread. There's a whole story about the crowd at the beginning of the French Revolution reaching the castle, and I'm going to show you Versailles while we're at it. It's behind us. Okay, so there's a whole story. Hey, Edward.
Hi.
There's a whole story about the crowd at the gate of the castle and chanting, "We want bread, we want bread, we want bread." Well, Marie Antoinette and the king were having breakfast at that time, and when she asked, the attendants, what do they want? And he responded, well, they asked for bread, and they didn't have any more bread because breakfast was over. So she said, well, let them have the cakes. It's not a diminutive, it's not something that she said in a negative way. She just was practical. She says, you people are idiots. If we don't have bread, give them whatever we have. That was the story. But anyway, over the years, I guess it got put out of context, and you can take any statement by any king of France out of context and use it to serve your own purposes or whatever propaganda you want to give. So anyway, I'm just trying to rehab Marie Antoinette a little bit. So another tidbit of history, the crowd came in and eventually they captured the king, Marie Antoinette, and the 2 children and brought them back to Paris. Now, Versailles is not that far from Paris. You saw us, it took us about 25 minutes to, well, technically it takes 15 minutes to go into Paris by train. But they had carriages at the time, of course, and there was also a lot of people circling or being surrounding the carriage. It took them 3 days to get from Versailles to Paris because that carriage was barely doing 3 or 4 miles per hour, and they were petrified, rightfully so, that they were going to get their heads chopped off, and of course they did. The king and Marie Antoinette get in prison. They are at the Conciergerie in Paris, and we saw that a couple of days ago. The king gets beheaded first in 1993, and then Marie Antoinette goes through trial, her and her 2 children. The daughter, I'm not sure what happened to her, but eventually they behead her. They made her do some sort of confession where she said that she was having sex with a son. All sorts of really crazy stuff. The woman was just being tortured on a daily basis, even though she was the queen. And Louis XVII, her son, stayed in the jail way past his parents being beheaded after the revolution. And there were some stories as to maybe he escaped, maybe he was rescued by his jailer or somebody who was in attendance of him. That is unsure, but all I know is that the last was that they actually did find the remains of somebody who could be Louis XVII, that it was a child about his age, a male child that had been severely beaten on multiple occasions, to the point where they found some of the fabric from his pants fused back with the bones on his legs. So you can imagine the barbary that this poor kid went through. I mean, you know, I understand why we had a revolution when you look at this stuff and how people outside of the courts were living. I get it, but it's a child, you know, so that's what I'm saying. Now, we're gonna find a place to eat and we're gonna enjoy the garden. Here's the castle again in the background, and here is parts of the garden. This is just the main area. The garden is actually underneath this area because this is elevated. Over there is the orangery where they have all of the orange trees, and we're going to go see that right now. This is a south wing of the castle, and right there on the side is the orangery, and this is where they have all the orange tree and citrus tree and grapefruit trees for the kings, and these are actually on wheels. So in the winter they go into these big buildings right there where they still get plenty of light but don't get damaged by the weather, and that allowed the king to have citrus fruit throughout the entire season. So you guys, we are in luck. Guess what? We rented a golf cart and we're gonna do the entire garden by golf cart because it's much easier, and we're all very tired. It's a lot of walking in the castle, you guys, and it's not just walking, it's stepping in the same spot a lot. So yeah, golf cart, they are 32 euros per hour, and then they charge you 8 euros per every quarter. It takes about an hour to do the whole thing. So here we go. Enjoy it. So we are here at the Petit Trianon, and this is Marie Antoinette's summer residence. The Grand Trianon was more like a guest house, and this is basically the entire estate here on the left and on the right of this little mini castle. was the quarters when the queen wanted to stay away from the court and not have to deal with any of the nonsense. So we can go and visit it, and of course we'll go to the hamlet right next to it, though it's a little bit of a walk. So her servants and everybody would be in there, and then she would live in that little palace here. It's quite cute. It's tiny compared to Versailles, of course, but it's very, very cute. So we're done with the Petit Trianon, and you see it was pretty small and pretty cute. She kept it as simple as possible considering who she was. This is the Temple of Love, all the way in the back, and we are on our way to the hamlet. As to the question as to why there is a Temple of Love in the Queen's Garden, one may suggest that the lady had many lovers. So here we are. This is the hamlet. It's a series of little houses meant to be looking like little Norman houses. This one is the boudoir. It has a little vegetable garden. This is what the estate looks like. This is a Dior thing. I don't know. I think they did a fashion show here. There's a little house over there. This huge corpse in the pond. I don't know if we can see them.
They're hungry.
So in this pond right there, they found about 20 years ago a carp, a huge carp that had an eagle's talon stuck inside its backbone, and they went into the archives, in the National Archives, and they found out that this was actually an event under the time of Napoleon, where they tried to, they were fishing carps with birds of prey, and one of the carp was so big that it actually grabbed the bird and dragged it underwater, and they never saw the bird again until they fished out that particular carp about 120 something years later and found it with the talons of that eagle stuck in its back. That's the real story. So, yeah, it's 6 o'clock, 6:30, and pretty much we got to bring back the cart. So we're not going to see the Grand Trianon. There's a car passing by, because Parisians can come and use the car in the park. There's several entrances, and that's about it. So I will see you later. We're going to my sister for dinner. My mom is there making dinner for us, and for now, we're just gonna say goodbye to the Petit Trianon.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Bye.
You know we were.
The Hamlet and the Petit Trianon are my favorite to look at when you go to Versailles. The castle, you know, it just gets overwhelming after a while. It just looks the same. It's beautiful and grandiose and all of that, but I like the simplicity of the village, and I like the simplicity of the Petit Trianon.